This is Metal Mike, and in this episode of the 80's Glam Metalcast, we talk to the singer from Mojo Gurus and Rox Gang, Kevin Steele. Kevin is a funny guy, and he's got some cool stories. Check it, no easy way out. So Kevin, welcome to the 80's Glam Metalcast. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, no problem. So, a lot of the glam metalheads out there, they know you from the singer of Rox Gang. So, they might not realize you've been very active with the band of Mojo Gurus. Why don't you tell everybody about Mojo Gurus?
Mojo Gurus kind of evolved out of, Rox Gang was like a big voodoo glam slam band, and in the early '90s, when all the big rock clubs started closing and grunge was taking over, and Rox Gang style of music was kind of, to be honest, falling out of fashion.
For sure.
And I had always been influenced by guys like, as a front man, I always liked flamboyant front men like Mick Jagger, Steven Tyler. And, the music I grew up on was like blues-based rock and roll. And then when I got a little older, I started getting into like bands like T-Rex, Mott the Hoople, and the New York Dolls. And that's when I fell in love with the glam thing. And then, but I always had these blues rock roots. And there's a big, from the first Rox Gang album, at that point I was just like, really, I was just writing lyrics and handing them over to my guitar players, But as I got a little more musical savvy myself, and I started coming up with musical ideas, I started steering the band. There's a huge difference from the first Rox Gang album, I think, to the second Rox Gang album, as far as headed in a more blues rock direction. So anyways, Rox Gang is starting to become quite frankly, it was like a lot of baggage with that name at a certain point in time. And one night we were playing a party for it was my old lady at the time. We took over a club in downtown St. Petersburg called the Voodoo Lounge, and we didn't want to go in with a big full-on Rox Gang production, so we played under an alias. We called ourselves the Mojo Gurus, and we played a bunch of old rock and rockabilly, some old school kind of like outlaw country, and we had a blast, man. And the next Rox Gang album we called Mojo Gurus, and it was dedicated to all our Mojo Gurus, all our idols. And the name Mojo Gurus came from, mojo is from the blues vernacular. Your mojo, it's like if you got your mojo working, you got your groove on, you got your swagger. And a guru is a spiritual leader, so you put them together, and that's where that name came from. And finally it got to be where all the big clubs were closing, and we had the big Rox Gang production where you come pulling up with a truck and lines of Marshall stacks and a huge light show, and those days were ending, and so we started to scale things down, and eventually we actually turned into the Mojo Gurus and went back to our roots and played more blues oriented rock.
Yeah, because I went back and I was listening to some of the Mojo Gurus, and I'm glad you said rockabilly, because I was you mentioned a lot of stuff. It's hard to put your finger on all of it, right? Yeah, but I hear the blues, but I heard some rockabilly. So I'm like, yeah, man, it's a mix of a lot of cool things all in one.
Yeah, I'm I don't know, I'm a rock and roll aficionado. You know, not only am I in a band, but like I'm a huge fan and collector of albums and kind of a, I don't know, kind of a student of rock and roll, and I like all kinds of rock and roll music as long as it's done good. And so I, you know, it was a chance for me to get back and do all that rockabilly, and there's still a lot of glam elements, and there were some country elements, and I don't know, we just wrapped it all together into the Mojo Gurus.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, with all of us, hey, we all have multiple dimensions to us as people. You know what I mean? Some people may want to just remember you as, oh, you know, the guy from Rox Gang. But hey, you know, you like blues, you like rockabilly, you like other things. On my Twitter channel, it's called 80's Glam Metal. And that's what I specialize in. So I'll post Rox Gang clips and all that kind of stuff. But every once in a while, maybe I'll post something heavy like Judas Priest or Manowar, and then people will come back, that's not glam metal. Well, no shit. You know what I mean? I like different kinds of music. That's just the name of the channel. So.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, when I fell in love with rock and roll in the first place, the bands that I was listening to, like, if you take a band like the Rolling Stones, for instance, you know, they do rock and roll, they do blues, they do reggae, they do R&B. Nobody told bands like the Beatles or the Stones, like, oh wow, man, you're you know, you're experimenting in too many kinds of too many genres. Like, what? Well, that was the charm of those bands, you know.
Yep.
And I don't know, today things are so, like, tunnel vision, you know? So many bands are, quite honestly, I find boring because, like, they're just, all their albums sound exactly the same. All the songs on the album basically sound the same. It's like nobody experiments anymore.
No, you're right. And I think labels like to put things, you know, like cookie cutter, you know, this is metal, this is blues, this is rap. And a lot of times when any bands try to deviate from what they're known for, they get punished by the fans, they get punished by everybody. And it's not fair.
Oh yeah. When I went from Rox Gang to the Mojo Gurus, lost a lot of the 80's hair metal fans, whatever. But see, I never really considered Rox Gang. I mean, we came out in that time, and I had a shredding guitar player, Wade Hayes, that definitely played in that 80's style. But I felt my songwriting, songs like Red Rose and Fastest Gun in Town and Ball and Chain, that's not like Girls, Girls, Girls or Cherry Pie or Down Boys.
No, you're right.
And you know, we were Live Fast, Die Young, and whatever. But I never really associated us with a lot of those bands that came out, the bands that we got associated with, I never felt a particular kinship to. My glam influences, like I said, they were like 70's glam, you know? I was into T-Rex and Bowie and the Dolls and Iggy and Mott the Hoople. And, you know, I come from bumfuck Florida, and we didn't get signed until, like, I think in 88, maybe at the end of 87. And, you know, by that time, when Rox Gang was recording their first album, I can remember sitting we did it at a place out in California called the Enterprise. The studio was owned by Billy Mummy, who was Will Robinson in Lost in Space.
Oh.
He's also part of a duo, I can't remember their name right now, but you know that novelty song, Fish Heads?
No, I don't think I do, no.
Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads.
No,
well, that was Billy Mummy too. I can remember being in the lobby while my guitar player was recording guitar solos, and I'd be in the lobby watching TV, watching MTV when they played videos back then, and I remember seeing the first Nirvana videos. You know, Nirvana and Soundgarden had albums out before our first album came out.
Right.
So like the writing was already on the wall. Had we been signed a year or two earlier, you know, if my band was dirt poor, man, if we would have had the money to move out to California like a lot of bands, and had we got signed a year or two earlier, could have made, you know. As it was, our first album sold about 250,000 copies. But I think we definitely would have won platinum if we'd been signed just a year earlier, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, because we got signed at that point, where it might give some people who didn't know us the impression that we were getting on the bandwagon late, in reality, you know, Rox Gang had been together for years, playing locally before we got signed, and we were like, I mean, Rox Gang existed here before there was MTV, and people nationally knew Poison or Motley Crue or anything. So, people down here in Florida, are you freaking kidding me? They were, I mean, hey, I love bands like Leonard Skinner, but, I mean, that's what these people, they would go see Rox Gang in a bar and they would freak, right? They thought we were like freaking transvestite junkies, right? And these are like, you know, I hate to say redneck, but these were good old Florida boys. And they would come see Rox Gang in those early days before they, you know, you got to remember, they hadn't been exposed to bands like Motley Crue or Poison yet. And, yeah, people used to really freak on us locally. Then when it exploded on MTV, when there was bands like Motley Crue and everything, people were like, wow, you guys were really ahead of your time. When in reality, the reason I started wearing, you know, eyeliner and wild clothes was because of 70s glam bands that I liked, you know? So it was always a weird trip and a bad timing for Rox Gang.
So in 1988, you know, you put out Things You've Never Done Before, and I can tell you, because like I said, I have a page that's dedicated to this genre of music. When I put out a video, or if anybody does, people go crazy about this album, the videos, everything associated with it. So that's got to feel good, right? All these years later, people still enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's my legacy, you know. It's not to sound, I mean, if I've made any kind of mark on this world, you know, I left behind albums and videos, you know, and yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I dreamed about it since I was a little kid. When I was a little boy, and I can remember watching the Monkees on TV, and before I knew I had any kind of musical ability, songwriting or musical ability, like, I just wanted to live that lifestyle, you know? I wanted to wear cool clothes and live it like, you know, live with my band in a Monkees headquarters and drive a monkey mobile and I remember one episode specifically where they were in France and all these girls were chasing Davy Jones all over the Eiffel Tower. And when they finally caught him, they ripped his shirt off. And I was like, right there, man. I said, that's what I'm going to do.
Do you think that, you know, once you're in the scene, I mean, obviously, when you're a kid, it was the same thing with me. I mean, when I watched all the hair bands of the 80s, that's what I wanted to do, you know what I mean? But I think now that I talk to everybody and I know the back end of it, I mean, there's so much crazy stuff in the business that's not glamorous, that's not fun. You know what I mean? You had to have experienced some of that.
Oh yeah. First of all, like the rock and roll that I fell in love with, you know, like it was all wild times. I was looking at the golden gods of rock and roll from the 70s, you know, when it was something to be a rock star. And I imagined all the backstage, you know, shenanigans and all the things that went on in the tour, on the tour bus and at the hotels. And these days, by the time I made it, I got a little taste of that, but really it was changing so fast. And these days, you know, Aerosmith backstage, they're not doing drugs and stuff. They're doing a corporate meet and greet, you know?
Right.
They're getting pictures taken with freaking fat cats and their families and stuff. And like, concerts are now, everybody sits in an assigned seat, you know? When I first started going to concerts, it was just, every concert was festival seating. Fight your way to the front stage.
Yep.
You might be able to touch Steven Tyler's foot, you know, but these days, and it sucks, not only for the people, not only for the audience, but for the freaking band. Like, bands feed off the energy of the crowd, you know? The better the crowd is, the better night the band's going to have. And when everybody's sitting in an assigned seat, and all the best seats up front at festivals and stuff are by people who can afford the VIP tickets, not necessarily the most rabid fans, but the freaking yuppies with enough money to buy, you know, sucks. It's completely not rock and roll. And anybody thinks, and yes, when you first, like for instance, you're a local band, we're starting to do good, we're starting to get national press. Okay, you get a record deal, you think, you know, you're young, you're naive, you think, I made it, I got a record deal, because that's all you strive for when you're a kid. Okay, yeah, it's a necessary step, but now you go from being the big, you know, the big fish in a small pond to all of a sudden, you're not shit, you know. If you're a baby band, you got a record deal, big fucking deal. And things are just, the struggles that I had with like we were on Virgin Records. We were Virgin Records' first hard rock signing, okay? Now these days they've had, you know, a lot of time's gone by since then, and they've had the Rolling Stones and David Bowie and Iggy Pop and all kinds of, you know, huge rock and rollers have been on Virgin. But we were Virgin's first hard rock signing, and they didn't have a freaking clue what to do with us, okay? They knew they liked us, but they hadn't marketed a band like us before. And it was crazy, man. My A&R guy, Lyrique Weymouth, his sister's Tina Weymouth, the bass player in the Talking Heads.
Oh, okay, yep.
When I presented the songs that would become the second Rox Gang album, he was like, I was so proud. I thought it was so much better than the first album. I thought musically, I knew myself. I had matured, you know, and we were like adding I was going in a direction I felt more comfortable with. It was less metal and a little more, like I said, like a blues oriented. When I say blues oriented, to me, early Aerosmith is a blues oriented rock band. I mean that direction, okay? I don't mean full on blues. And the frickin' guy listened to our songs, and I was like, he's going to be knocked out, man. And he came back and he said, I think you need to push the envelope hard. And he said, there was a hit song at the time, the Divinals. When I think of you, I touch myself. Remember that song?
Oh, yeah.
It was total pop and total not. And he said, you need to just put out something more like the I was like, what am I going to do? Like, we're a baby band. You can't just when you're a baby band, like, you can't just come to the label and start telling everybody, you're wrong. This is what you need to do, you know? We made our first videos. No Easy Way Out was our first video. We did it on a Hollywood soundstage. Nigel Dick directed it. He directed Welcome to the Jungle. And we were one of the first bands to use that blue screen.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, Jeff Off from Virgin Records was there, and he vice president, and he was like giving us all these corny suggestions, and I just wanted to say, like, fucking remove this guy from the set, you know, but you can't.
Nope.
And yeah, it's just so much hassle, man. In the music business, there's so much luck involved, and so much who you know, and it's all about connections. You know, my little brother, my kid brother, managed our band from the time he negotiated the Virgin record deal. The kid was like 18 or 19, and he got us a very attractive record deal, right? And but being from bumfuck, like, we didn't have the connections, you know?
Right.
Whereas a band that came out close to the same time as us, say the Black Crowes, you know, their manager was David Lee Roth's fucking, that Pete Angeles guy. He was steering them in their image. He was steering them in their videos. He had all the, can you imagine the connections he has being David Lee Roth's manager?
Oh, yeah.
At that time?
Yeah.
You know, it makes a world of difference. But, you know, whatever. All I could do was write the best songs I could and get out there and have as much fun as I could have. That's the way I looked at it.
What was it like to work with Beau Hill? He produced this album, right? The debut?
Beau Hill was a great guy. We chose Beau. See, Virgin they didn't know what they were doing with us, but they had tons of money, and they got us everything we wanted. They spent a lot of money on our videos. They gave us a lot of tour support in the beginning, and they let us pick. You know, they said, who do you want to produce your album? And we gave them a list, and Beau Hill was on the top because we had a couple of guys in our band, me included, that were big fans of the band Kix.
Yep.
And Beau had just produced their latest album at the time. And, you know, he worked with Rat and Alice Cooper and, of course, Winger and Warrant, who we weren't really crazy about, but musically. But anyways, Beau came in, and Beau was a great guy. He helped us. He's the only producer I felt that ever had ideas as far as, like, constructive ideas as to structuring a song. Like, he might just... It was the only time I ever had a producer that I agreed with when he said, you know, you need to do the bridge here or whatever. You need to do an extra chorus at the end of the song or whatever, you know. All of this stuff made sense and improved us. And he was a super nice guy, super funny, super fun to be around. It was my best experience. I worked with Jack Douglas and the Mojo Gurus. He produced all the Aerosmith. I mean, he's done everybody.
Right.
He's done Aerosmith. He's done the New York Dolls. He's done Cheap Trick. He's done everybody, right? He did John Lennon's last album, you know. He was working on that album when John Lennon was shot.
Oh, my God.
I got a lot of respect for Jack as an artist, but as a human being, I did not get along with Jack Douglas. And recording that was Shaking in the Barn, was the name of the CD he produced, and with the Mojo Gurus, and it was a freaking miserable experience. And sometimes you click, and sometimes you don't, you know?
Yeah.
And I've never been super comfortable. To me, being in a rock band is about playing live, and studio is like a necessary evil. You got to have the album to go out on the road.
Of course.
You know? But studio environment is not conducive to rock and roll. I mean, we do what we can with our scarves and our incense and some mood lighting, but the studio is a cold, sterile place where you get no immediate feedback, like energy from the you know, from an audience. I've never been super comfortable in the studio.
So let's talk about the first single, because I think this was an amazing first single. And I don't know, over the years, I just still gravitate to this song as probably my favorite, is No Easy Way Out, man. It's just got a cool, eerie little riff kind of in the beginning, and it's just catchy.
Right.
It just, I don't know, man. I love that song. Like, that's one that I'll just can't let go of, man. It's just perfect.
Thanks. No Easy Way Out and Scratch My Back, and half the songs on the first album were written by me and a guitar player that's not even on the first album. His name was Eric Carr, and he died right before we got signed. And it was weird circumstances, man. This cat was my best friend. He was like a brother. He's my guitar player. He was my glimmer twin, you know? And we lived down here in Florida. Eric had a van, and he was a fisherman. He'd go fishing at night. He'd have drinks from Jack Daniels and do a few lines of coke, smoke some weed. He'd be out on a bridge trying to catch a snook, right? Well, one night he was out on a bridge with somebody who he owed a lot of money to for coke, and nobody knows what happened, but apparently they say he fell off the bridge, right? Broke his neck. And we were poised to be signed. Carl Kennedy, you know the band The Rods?
Yes, yep.
Okay, Carl Kennedy's the drummer. He's also a producer. He's produced Anthrax, Overkill, a bunch of early heavy albums. And he was looking for something that was a little more, that wasn't so freaking, Anthrax, And he heard our demos, and he was all set to come down here. We eventually recorded an album-length demo called Love 'Em and Leave 'Em. Later on we released it as a CD, and it's what got us signed to Virgin. But the night before he was supposed to come down here to start pre-production, Eric dies. So I was freaking heartbroken, man. This guy was like my brother, and it really hit me hard. And for a while I was like, I didn't know whether I wanted to. I don't know. I just had mixed emotions, I just didn't know what to do. And then I figured out, like, look, I'm going to fucking keep going, and I'm going to get signed, and I'm going to get these songs that Eric and I wrote on an album and get them out there for people to hear, and that's the best tribute that I could ever give them,
Yeah.
And lucky for me, we did. And so Eric wrote No Easy Way Out with me. He came up with that riff you're talking about.
And you know what?
That was great, man.
You know what hit me this morning is that I think Twist of Cain by Danzig borrowed that, or I don't know which came out first, but it hit me the other day. I was like, man, it's like that. They're similar.
There's a Dictator song that has a similar riff too. The name of it eludes me right now, but people have said that we copied the Dictators, but it's not the same riff. It's similar, and I'm a Dictators fan. I don't think Eric ever even heard of the Dictators, and he came up with the riff. So, and yeah, I loved that riff when I heard it, and those lyrics just came pouring out of me. And my best songs are always ones that I just sit down and boom, they come out. If I got to work on it too long, usually those aren't the best songs.
Right. Know? Yeah, you're overthinking it.
Red Rose on the first album, when I sang "Oh Caroline," you know, as a writer, I took some poetic license, but his name was Eric Carr, and you know, so I just changed I wrote it as if I was singing to a girl, "Oh Caroline," and you know, in the song, the singer is dying, and that was my little tribute to Eric. Okay, back to Ball and Chain.
Oh, actually, girl, let me throw in something there, because when I listen to that one, it makes me think of those like those tragedy songs that like from the 50s and 60s of like the, you know, the guy like the Jimmy Dean, you know, the guy goes over the cliff. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, yeah, and that's funny because I didn't know that it had anything to do with something real. So that's cool.
Like Wreck on the Highway.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
And yeah, so I just, in my mind, I was picturing kind of a Civil War, antebellum. Oh, here's an interesting side bit, talking about the backstabbings that go on in rock and roll behind the scenes. Our second video, Scratch My Back, was directed by this English cat named Ralph Simon, and he directed all the early LA Guns videos. And Rox Gang went to England to tour, and I was hanging out with Ralph, and he'd already come to America to shoot Scratch My Back, and now we were over there. And I said, I have this great idea for our next song. The video never got made, but our plans at the time was the next video was going to be Red Rose. And I said, I want to be standing on the porch of like a old southern mansion, and I want rose petals to be raining down on me as I'm singing and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going, what a great visual that would be, right?
I already know it. I know where this is going.
I dig it, he says. Our video never got made, and what Ballad of Jane, you know, he makes a video, and they weren't rose petals, but he swiped my idea, man.
As soon as you said the rose petals in the mansion, I was like, wait a minute, man. I'm Ballad of Jane.
It kind of nicked my idea. So, God bless Ralph. He is a good guy, even if he did.
All right, so let's go back to the story of Ball and Chain. Tell me the Ball and Chain story.
So, Ball and Chain, you know, that was my attempt. Like I said, there was times when I was just a little uncomfortable, like with, like I wanted to be have like a Aerosmith type band, and there was times when I felt like some of this stuff we're doing is just a little too heavy, like Live Fast, Die Young or something, you know, and so when I sat down with that song, and I was like, you know, the lyrics came first with that song. And that was my attempt at writing something, you know, kind of blues rock and old, you know, I could feel like a, you know, I don't know. Then all of a sudden there was like Uncle Tom's Cabin and shit like that, you know. But that was my stab at doing I don't know, it's a southern blues front porch kind of feeling thing, you know, blending it with rock and roll guitars and stuff, you know.
Yeah, and that's funny that you say that it's funny you say the lyrics are written before the melody, because the melody's so prominent. You know what I mean?
Well, the melodies are all mine. When I say the music, I mean, okay, right from the start, how my songwriting personally evolved was, first I was just a lyric writer. Then I started hearing the melody, as I was writing the songs, I would feel the melody. And I would say, I didn't know how to communicate this because I didn't play guitar, right? And then I started, singing my melodies, like singing the words, how I wanted to sing the song. Well, my guitar players are fast studies. All of a sudden, they lay down rhythm behind it, right? But it got to be where, when I write a song now, the melody and the lyrics come almost simultaneously. Like, as I'm writing the lyrics, I'll have the idea of pretty much how I want to sing it, like. Then I started actually singing rhythm, like I would say, like a song like Nine Lives. And I came to those guys and said, I want to go like, I would actually sing the guitar part. Nah, 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 and they would copy and play it. And as we kept going, as I kept going, my ideas became a little more sophisticated, and they became better at reading me. We became better at communicating, with this special freaking language we had. And that's how our songwriting evolved. But the lyrics and melody of every single Rox Gang song are mine. And as time went on, more and more of the music. To where in the Mojo Gurus, the last Mojo Gurus album we did was called Gone, and I wrote the entire album, words, music. We used strings on one song, and I actually directed the string section and the horn section, and with me, it was a matter of, like people talk about building blocks, but for me, it was like getting rid of stumbling blocks. It was like, don't be scared to make a fool. Like, you just sing your ideas to these guys. I'm working with really good musicians, and like, they learned a lot. Most of them learned how to play by ear. All my guitar players learned how to play by ear anyways. So just sing your ideas to them. Hum them. Whatever you got to do, And, so ball and chain.
What so you've got a pretty distinct voice, a lot different than a lot of the guys that were out at that time. Who do you think, how did you get there? Or who are some of your influences, you think?
Well, I think that the reason that I've been told this over and over, almost everybody who interviews me says what you just said, okay? And I think what I can attribute that to is the fact that I never tried to sound like anybody else. I had influences. My influences were more like lyrically and image-wise. But as far as singing, even when I was starting out and singing cover songs, I didn't try and sing the song like the original artist. I wanted to sing it like me, Like, what is the sense? To me, being in a band is all about expressing your individuality, right?
Right.
Okay, you're not expressing your individuality if you're trying to imitate Ronnie Dio or whoever, If you're trying to sound exactly like somebody who you admire, I think that's a really bad idea. And I would tell any singer coming up, try and be yourself, and right from the start, try and develop your own style, You want to sound like yourself. You don't want, this guy does a mean Rob Halford, whatever, but he isn't Rob Halford, and he doesn't do it as good as Rob Halford. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Be yourself. It's all about expressing yourself, expressing your individuality, Why would you want to sound like somebody else? So I never really tried. There's maybe some rare examples when, like, I was going for a certain feel. I'm a huge Mark Bolan fan, and I do have a couple songs in the Mojo Gurus where we actually sat down and listened to some T-Rex guitar sounds and stuff, and I will admit that there are a couple of songs where I tried to get kind of a breathy Mark Bolan kind of vocal, but, you know, it still sounds like Kevin Steele. I mean, no matter how hard I try, I don't know. I'm making it sound like it's this, you know, great wise thing, but, like, I don't know. I'm just a rock and roll shouter, dude. I've never thought that I particularly had a great voice. A lot of my favorite singers don't. You know, that's not what rock and roll is about. I'm not trying to knock anybody. Of course, you know, if you have a great voice, more power to you. You know, but like, I listen to people like, you know, Mick Jagger and Jim Morrison and Iggy and, like, Lou Reed. Like, they didn't have great voices.
No,
you know?
No, I'm with you 100%. I'm with you, because there's like you said, you could say the Jeff Tates, the Rob Halfords, the Ronnie James Dio. You know, you could say that, wow, that guy's technically got a great voice, but I've probably always liked the people who maybe weren't the greatest, but just had more character. You know, not that those guys didn't have character, but just were interesting, just sounded cool. They didn't have to be
exactly. It's character. That's the perfect. You hit the nail right on the head. When I was a kid and I first heard Alice Cooper, you know, I loved that original Alice Cooper band.
Oh, yeah.
Alice is definitely one of my Mojo Gurus.
Yeah, me too.
I met him and told him so, and had the opportunity to give him a Mojo Gurus album, where it says right in the liner notes, who was dedicated to all our. We had listed several of our influences, and Alice was in there. And Alice was the nicest guy, man. And I tell you, a lot of times when you meet your heroes, you meet your idols, sometimes you could really be disappointed.
Yeah.
You know? But Alice did not disappoint. You know, he wasn't fucking Alice Cooper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He wasn't some ghoul, necrophiliac ghoul. He was a sweet fucking guy. Like, he was a very nice guy, and he was super nice to me and my old lady, and I had nothing but nice things to say about him.
Yeah, that's awesome. What year do you guys do the follow-up?
I don't know. It took a few years, because what happened... So Virgin was going to put us on a subsidiary label. I think it was called Charisma or something. And we said, fuck this, man. They didn't know what they're doing. We're on the main label. Now they're putting us on a subsidiary. Our lawyer negotiated a release from Virgin Records, and we got out not owing them a penny, right? And on top of that, they had already paid for us to go demo out all our songs for the next album. And we walked away with those tapes, too. And so we had the second album pretty much in the can. A lot of people don't know this, but in the second album, there's already, if you look at the picture, there's lineup changes.
Right.
But those lineup changes didn't happen. Those songs were all recorded by the original band. The same lineup that's on Things You've Never Done Before recorded The Voodoo You Love. When Stacey Blades joined the band, even though his picture is on the album, he didn't play a lick on that album. Well, I take that back. We added 2 songs to the album that he does play on. But the meat of the album was already recorded, and it wasn't him. And it wasn't Tommy Weeder on drums, and it wasn't Dorian Gray on bass. It was all my original guys from Things You've Never Done Before. But this is another interesting thing. I told you about my guitar player buddy from the original Rox Gang that died. Well, Well, the lineup that's on Things You Never Done Before is probably the best known lineup because videos and that album sold the best. And what people also don't realize is, I told you Rox Gang existed for years before that album, and there's not a single guy on Things You Never Done Before, with the exception of yours truly, that was in the original Rox Gang. There was a whole other band, and slowly, one by one, and then when Eric died, that was the last, when we got Wade Hayes in the band. And that kid, woo, Rox Gang, brother, it was, I didn't, you know, I thought I was going for the, I was a kid from Florida that was realizing my life's dream, right?
Yeah.
I got an album out. The very first night we were in Los Angeles, Virgin puts us up in this condo, and it was the second night. The second night we were there, because we were on Virgin, Keith Richards was releasing his first solo album, Talk Is Cheap. And, like, we got to go to his album release party at the Whiskey, and I'm this kid from, you know, bumfuck, and I'm rubbing elbows with every LA rock star was there, right? And I was kind of doing my best to look cool and, like, unimpressed, you know? But I was like, holy shit! And Keith Richards, of course, would impress me anytime. The guy's like the Pope of rock and roll, but none of those guys would even, these days, they wouldn't even faze me, you know?
Right.
Now I know most of them are a bunch of jerk-offs. And, you know, and I feel like musically I am their peer, you know, like, but then I didn't even have my first album on, and I was like, wow, there's all the guys in Rat, there's the guys in Faster Pussycat, there's Axl Rose, you know, what, Ronnie James. I went in the men's room, and I'm at the stall, and, you know, a guy, when you're at the stall, you keep eyes forward.
Yeah.
But out of my peripheral vision, I could see, it seemed like a kid was taking a piss next to me, right? You see, and as I backed away from the stall, it wasn't a little kid. It was Ronnie James Dio.
That must have been mind-blowing. So basically with that, I mean, music trends had changed, so, I mean, it had to be tough at that point.
Yeah, and plus, we had recorded that, you know, right on the heels of Things You'd Never Done Before, and then we make a split with Virgin, and immediately Columbia, I think, stepped in, and they were going to release our second album, and then in the music business, man, you could be this close, and then all of a sudden the people you're dealing with are gone, you know, the next day. And there was some situation like that, and so we were like, fuck. And, but we had our second album, and we just did a distribution deal with Paris Records, and put it out, you know, ourselves, basically, on Paris. And, well, with Tom Mather's help with the distribution, you know. But, so, yeah, not only were trends changing, or had changed, but the album really had been recorded 2.5 years, almost 3 years before it actually got released. There was a long time of us searching for another label, and this and that and the other thing, and then there was member change. So in that time, you know, guys who were used to being on a per diem in Rox Gang, you know, it led to splits, and it led to the first big shake-up in our lineup change. I had guys in my band who, it was like they watched too many it's like they watched too many rock and roll movies. Like they saw Jimmy Page or Keith Richards or whoever throwing TVs out the hotel windows, and like, times had changed since then. Like I was saying earlier, the rock and roll that I fell in love with as a kid, it's not the same anymore. It's not as fun. It's just not the same animal, man. And it's not the same party as it used to be. But you couldn't tell those guys that, and they were throwing shit out the window, and they were smashing them, tearing up hotel rooms, and they were tearing up clubs, and they were holy freaking terror, man. And when you're young, I don't know. A lot of times I was right in there with them, but sometimes it was just like, you got to pay the bills the next day.
Right. Yeah. There's a budget, right?
I'm surprised they never hurt somebody or killed. I remember one night they threw a big metal, like a cot, a fold-out cot. We were staying at some hotel, and to be frugal, one of the crew members was going to sleep in their room on a cot, and they were not hip to the idea, and they took the cot and they went out on the balcony. It was up it wasn't on ground level, and there was a parking lot below, and they just tossed the freaking cot. I mean, if somebody would have been down there. Crazy stuff used to. One time, we had the bridesmaids, like a wedding. I don't know what do girls call? Oh, bachelorette party, I guess.
Yeah.
And we had a like angry husband or angry groom to be. Trying to look in all our rooms and shit. Life was an adventure with those guys, man. You never knew what was going to happen or who was going to. We would get into fist fights among ourselves. There was definitely a lot of heavy drinking and a lot of heavy. In those days, cocaine was, the drug of choice, and too much coke. When you mix coke and Jack Daniels and ignorance,
dangerous combination.
It's a dangerous combination, And ego, throw some ego in there, and it meant for some harrowing times. So, anyways, we make the Voodoo You Love, and it's 3 years behind the time in a musical climate has already changed, and really that was the beginning of the end. We put out a couple more Roxx Gang albums, one called, like I said, Mojo Gurus, and there was Drinking TNT and Smoking Dynamite. But by that time it was like, what are we going to do? It was like we had this big 80's production, and the clubs we were playing, we weren't playing in theaters anymore. We were playing in clubs. The clubs were freaking getting smaller. The interest in our kind of music was dying out. We refused to freaking bend. And a lot of bands in those days that were in that 80s scene all of a sudden started wearing Doc Martens and cut long shorts and Doc Martens, and T-shirts. And we were, fuck that glam, grunge sucks, glam lives. We were still full makeup, And finally it just got to be, like I said, the baggage of being Rox Gang. It was too much. So that was when finally after that party, where we played as the Mojo Gurus, we had so much fun doing that. We just said, you know what? Maybe it's time to make a change. We weren't weren't ready to call it quits. I certainly wasn't. I knew I had a lot more songs in me, and I'd always wanted to go in a more bluesy direction, and so that was my chance.
So now, do you get offers ever to regroup as Rox Gang or any festival dates? Does anybody
all the time?
You? Yeah.
Not only do they make us offers to reunite, I've had a time with other. I don't know if I should really say their names. I don't want to embarrass them, but I've had bands that you would know from the 80s get in contact with me and say, Kevin, our agent has a whole tour plan. We'll play as Rox Gang. We'll be the band. You don't even have to come to rehearsals. Just show up, and we'll do a tour as Rox Gang.
Wow.
And I don't want to. This is the way I look at it. I grew up idolizing guys like Steven Tyler, right? Alice Cooper. A lot of these guys. It's very hard to age gracefully in rock and roll, especially as a singer. Guitar players got that whole gypsy, gunslinger, pirate look going. It looks good into their, Keith looked great till he was, till just recently. Joe Perry looks way cooler than Steve. I look at Steven Tyler now and I'm like, dude, it's great that you can still move out like that, and it's great that you still are fit enough to wear clothes like that. But you're 70-something. You shouldn't be wearing clothes like that. And their songs are still aimed at prepubescent girls. And to me, I'm not saying, look, Aerosmith fans, more power to you. Who the fuck am I to say anything? I'm just saying, for me personally, it's creepy.
Right.
That a 70-year-old grandpa is singing songs to teenage girls. At least the Stones and 80s fans, this is something you touched on earlier, they're like unforgiving, man, and they are like stuck. They want me to be Kevin Steele of Rox Gang, right? A lot of them. And, I was a different person. I was in my mid to late 20s when I started with the first album, not when I started, but by the time I got an album out. And I was singing songs like, Scratch My Back and Too Cool for School and I Need Your Sex and like, I don't want... I'm a middle-aged man now.
Right, yeah. I know what you
I would feel ridiculous dressing up like I used to dress up. I would feel ridiculous singing a song like I Need Your Sex or Too Cool for School. Too cool for school, dude.
I've been out of school for a while.
And like, there's I look around at my peers, a lot of guys from the 80s, and they're still fucking, Stephen Pearcy or somebody is still trying to be 80s Stephen Pearcy, And some of these guys they're still doing that 80s thing, and to me it's just, I'm sorry, to me personally, I just find it kind of sad, And, the most glam motherfuckers in the world. Who's more glam than David Bowie? Okay, David Bowie matured.
Right.
He didn't stage Ziggy Stardust. Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople is still playing today, but he doesn't wear platform boots and velvet suits. Mick Jagger doesn't wear sequin jumpsuits. It's like age appropriate, dudes. And I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me and who still love to see it. And the thing is, it's nostalgia, man. Music is in your brain. Music is hooked directly to nostalgia. Like, when you hear a song, it takes you right back to the day. Man, those were the fucking days when you hear that certain song. And people love to be brought back to those days. But as an artist, and I understand that, you know, and if you're a band and you're happy and satisfied with just satisfying people's sense of nostalgia, then whatever, that's your gig, but it's not mine. And you know, I gotta do what makes me happy. If I'm not happy, I would not be happy. If I was singing Rox Gang songs night after night at this age, I would be a miserable prick, and that defeats the whole purpose. You know?
I understand. I hear you. Yeah, I mean, life's too short.
So, what do you do?
Yeah. So I take it it's not happening.
And you can still look good, man. I'm not saying you can't look good, but you can't. But like, you know, God, when you're in your freaking 60s and 70s, stop wearing eyeliner and skin tight pants. It's disgusting. You know?
Well, man, hey, I think we ended on a good note. You answered all my questions. I really appreciate your time tonight.
All right, man. I had a good time. You're a good dude.
Wow, Kevin, man, he is a riot. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Remember, you gotta subscribe. Lots more interviews coming. Rock on!